Okay, in the international color system, there are three different things to talk about color. First one is the actual color of, that's called a hue. Then we have the amount of color, that's called a chroma. And finally, we have the lightness or the value. That means the third axis between black and white. All the colors are in a coordinate system between yellow, red, blue, and green. Sorry for the German words. Actually, in this three-dimensional system, all the tooth colors are in a very, very small area in the yellow-red quadrant area. That looks a little bit like a banana, and all the possible tooth colors are located there. In the traditional shade guides, for example, the shade guide that controls almost all the composites, we only have 4 different colors. So these are the color groups. For example, the groups A, which is reddish brown, the group B, which is reddish yellow, C is gray, and D is reddish gray. Inside these groups, the tabs are sorted by chroma. That's the amount of color. So the tab with the lowest chroma is, for example, in the A group, A1, and A4 has the highest amount of chroma. If you look at natural teeth, the first thing we can see is that obviously dentin is the tooth substance that's the base of the chromaticity. If we look at the tooth, we will see that the chroma is going down from marginally to incisally. So chroma decreases, and that's because usually teeth are covered by enamel. Enamel is very special because it is created by enamel rods, and so enamel itself serves, for example, like a glass fiber light conductor. And actually, enamel produces the impression of lightness, white, and opalescence. This optical property cannot be copied by a dental material, neither by ceramics nor by composite material. The actual tooth color is determined by dentin. Usually, distribution of these colors, the colors is uneven. And especially if you look at the classical Vita scale, then 25% of all tooth colors are A3, 22% are A3.5, 15% B3, and 14% A2. So more than 60% of all colors come from the A color of the tooth guide. If we look at a little bit closer at a tooth, we can see that color is not uniform. So we have seen marginally color is more opaque and yellow. And if we go to the incisal edge, we will have less color and more translucency. It depends a little bit on the age of the tooth. The internal anatomy of teeth is difficult because if it comes to translucent areas close at the incisal edge, the internal structure and the shape of the dentine is important. So, for example, we can have mamelons, which are the tiny line here at the end of the dentine. We can have a halo, that's the translucent area above the mamelons. Oh, sorry, not the translucent area, it's the opaque area at the incisal edge. And we also can have color spots in white, in orange, or in other colors. In older teeth, we see that the thickness of the enamel has gone down. And so usually we look at colors with more chromaticity. In older teeth, we see frequently cracks. We can see cloudy stripes like this. And so the tooth anatomy, the color anatomy of a tooth is difficult, very complex. And for example, the statement, this tooth has a color of A3, cannot deal with this complexity. So actually what we have to do is create a color map of a tooth. We can use that color map for planning of aesthetic layering and probably for lab communication if it comes to ceramic crowns or veneers. For example, in this tooth, we have different shades. It starts from A3.5 at the margin, and it goes down to A2 close to the incisal edge. We also have translucent areas, and we have our slight halo. Mamelons are not very visible in this tooth. All this we should notice and memorize before we start reconstruction. Color determination clinically is of course done with a shade guide. Usually we have to do it before we apply a rubber dam, and we need appropriate lighting conditions. So especially today there are a lot of light sources that have the same color compared to sunlight, and today they are not very expensive. So for example, it probably doesn't cost you anymore if you pick the light bulbs that come with a daylight color. Color determination can be done with a shade guide. I personally prefer the ceramic shade guides because they keep their color very long, even if you disinfect them 1,000 times. You also can do that with real composite shade guides, which are a little bit more expensive. Today, there are also these little color determination or measuring computers, which are difficult because if you do 2 or 3 measurements at the same tooth, you always get a different color. Now you know why. I personally like these, but you have to know how to handle them. And the way I do it is usually I make some test stubs of real composite, place them on top of the tooth, and polymerize them. So I actually see what will be the result later. Materials and instruments are very important. Composites can be classified according to their translucency. So there are very opaque masses. You can have composites that can replace dentine. You can have composites that have enamel shades. And there are also special composites that are really translucent. Today, using a modern universal composite is okay. So for fillings in the posterior region and in the anterior region. So today, the selection of your composite is not difficult anymore. I personally prefer to pick a composite that's a little bit more sculptable and not the real soft honey-like materials. And if you see, for example, the difference in opacity is not very much. Opaque masses have a translucency of around 30%. Universal masses, that are the ones that can replace dentine, have 50%. And incisal materials have a little bit more. They have a translucency of 55%. So this is one example with this material. That's actually Venus from Heraeus Colza. You can get 4 opaque masses: dark, light, medium, and bleach. And you also can get universal masses for dentine, and they come almost in the full Vita range with a full covering of the A masses. So for example, in this material, you can get masses from A1 to A5, which is not a standard color. The B and C and D masses are limited. And for today's patients, we also have bleach masses for the heavily bleached patients. Incisal colors are highly translucent. They come in clear and opalescent colors. What's the difference between clear and opalescent? The difference is opalescent masses look like a little bit milky, so they can block the background, while the translucent masses are translucent, and you can see through them directly at the background. Application of these masses, you don't need anything else than a flat plastic instrument. I personally like the very small ones. There are a lot of special instruments. I think that's a matter of personal taste, whatever you like. So there are a lot of instruments, for example, for posterior fillings. There are big instruments for class 5 fillings or veneers. I like them, but the only thing you really need is a flat plastic instrument. The only thing I personally like very much are brushes. Brushes are, if you look at the brushes with artificial hair, they are not very expensive. They are single use and they are very good for modeling of surfaces. I will show you that later. Important tools are wetting agents. So if you work with a brush, you want to wet the tip of the brush a little bit. These wetting agents, I personally use the one from Tanaka, from the Bella Forte set of colors. And if you like, finally, after polishing the tooth, you can put on a glaze to protect the surface. That's not a replacement for a good polish, because these glazes disappear very soon because they are not very stable. I personally like to have palette boxes because I don't want to use syringes intraorally. And the upper palette box that's made from Vivadent is, in my opinion, very perfect, because you can see the composites and the orange color of the lid actually makes that they don't cure in the light of your dental chair. Another good instrument is the air syringe. That's a very interesting device made from Cavo. You put that on the connector of the high-speed handpiece, and actually it assures that you can blow on your surfaces without getting water or oily water to the surface of the prepared tooth. Another instrument I like very much is an instrument I can use to actually control the composite. So the viscosity of the composite can be controlled by temperature. And this is just a little warmer where you can warm up the composite to a temperature between 40 and 50 degrees. That makes the composite more flowable. And I can show you in that little video. This is a cartridge that's warm. And you see another PLT that's cold. The lower one is the warm material. The upper one is the cold material. And you can see the difference. This is very soft. And the upper one is very hard. The difference is, with that you can control the viscosity. And if the temperature is low, the material is can be adapted very well. If the temperature is high, we have a good adaptability. If the temperature is low, it will keep the shape, so the sculptability is much better. Rubber dam is very important. All our students learn that. Without rubber dam, we can't get a good adhesive technique. Today, I don't want to talk about adhesion, because that would probably take too long. So for aesthetic work, standard rubber dam for me is 4-4 with 2 clamps on the 4. And a good use of ligatures. They are easy to do with dental floss. Not a big problem. And now let's look at some clinical cases. I would like to show you exactly what we do. For example, in this case, the first thing to do is look at the color and think about the layering scheme. And as you can see, I placed little stubs of material on top of the tooth. I've polymerized them, and probably we want to have marginally a color of A2, which will go down to an A1 close to the incisal edge. And if we want to place a little bit of translucency, we can use clear opalescent masses. So the actual layering scheme looks like that. We have an oral enamel layer. We have a facial enamel layer, and in between we are using triangular layers. This technique has been invented by Lorenzo Vanini because that gives a good transition between a high amount of chromaticity and a lower amount of chromaticity at the incisal area. And usually we want to block the color of the dentin. So the first layer always is a very opaque layer, just to block the background of the dentin. The other thing that has been invented very early and has been taught by Lorenzo Vanini is the use of a silicone index. Because we want to control the thickness of all these layers, the only way to do that is the silicone index, which will help us to create the tooth in the actual shape we need later. Creation of a silicone index takes some time, but later it helps us to do things more quickly and more safely. The other thing we have learned is in the old days, before we had good working dentin adhesives, the only way to fix the composite was by animal adhesion. So the old rule was the larger the class 4 filling, the more you have to bevel it, because we want more animal adhesion. Today, we know we don't need these very large bevels. Today, bevels are much smaller. And according to Vanini, actually at the oral part of the cavity, we don't need to put on a bevel anymore, because Vanini told us that the actual direction of the animal prisms is optimal orally, so you don't need a bevel, or just to what I'm doing, I just break a little bit the edge, the sharp edge. Problems with beveling are usually, sometimes you can see them. And what we found out is that mainly the horizontal margins are very well visible. The vertical margins are much better. So some people have recommended to place a lot of vertical margin, and you can see these are some examples for the creation of bevelings to give that a lot of vertical margin, or to do some steps. Another patient case. This case is really difficult because we only have a horizontal margin. So sometimes in these cases, it's much better to make actually a large bevel and to make that a veneer preparation. I will show you how we did this case. The first thing, we can do the silicone index intraorally, or we can do it on a model. In this case, we've done it on a model. We just created the new shape of the tooth with a little bit of wax. Created the silicone index. And now for the creation of a color scheme. It looks like A2 is the perfect color. We can go up to A1. Probably the light opaque material is a little bit too light. So in this case, we choose a medium material. And a clear material and clear opalescent is fine for the edges. So this is the case with rubber dam and the silicone index. What we are doing now, we are placing the clear opalescent material into the silicone index. Move that a little bit. And place it on top of the tooth. Adapt it a little bit. And as you probably can guess, this will be our all animal layer. Now we have to place the dentin core. So this is the opaque material. It will help us to block the horizontal line, which we don't want to see. So second layer, A2, universal. Higher translucency. It's very important to use translucent materials because only with translucent materials we can create an internal color anatomy of the tooth that looks alive.